Good evening, folks. This is Deb Delapiana, and this is your Shut the Fuck Up. Tonight's episode is sponsored by Ronna McDaniel and NBC. So, as we know, Ronna McDaniel was offered a job to be a political commentator on NBC. Yes, she was. And I use the past tense because that ill-fated hire is already over. Okay? Now, it should be over. In fact, that job should never have been offered to Ronna McDaniel. So when she was on Meet the Press back in November of last year, she was very non-committal. When she was asked if the Republican Party stood for revenge, her comment was that she wasn't going to talk about that in the middle of an election. Okay? So she was on another Meet the Press just recently. And she stated on that Meet the Press that she thought that the J6 insurrectionists should be held accountable and that Joe Biden won the election fair and square. This is not the Ronna McDaniel that worked for Donald Trump. Her statement was, and I'm going to read it to you. When you're the RNC chair, you kind of take one for the whole team, right? Now I get to be a little bit more myself. So what she is essentially saying is that while I was the RNC chair, I had to pay fealty to Donald Trump, right? But Donald Trump actually ousted Ronna McDaniel. So what she's doing now isn't really about bravery. It would have been about bravery had she stood up to him, even though she knew the big lie was a big fucking lie. So Ronna McDaniel can shut the fuck up. Let's talk about just exactly how Ronna McDaniel damaged this nation, how she aided and abetted the big lie, and how she paid fealty to a traitor. This is what Ronna McDaniel did. In January 2021, at Amelia Island in Florida, she told people that there were still thousands of affidavits attesting to election fraud, which could serve as proof of an unfair election. That's very different than Joe Biden was a legitimate winner. And then 1 year later in Salt Lake City, she backed a resolution that called the events of January 6th, quote, legitimate political discourse. She also supported the censure of Republican congresspeople who were involved in investigating the attacks. That would be Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, because everybody else were a bunch of cowards. Okay? Now, I very rarely, if ever, have agreed with Liz Cheney on anything except for this whole January 6th thing. I think would I have a vote for Liz Cheney? Never. And in fact, Liz Cheney, policy-wise, voted in lockstep with Trump on 93% of his policies when they were more friendly to each other. Okay, so we have nothing in common, Liz Cheney and I, except I think she was very brave to do what she did, and I think she continues to be brave. All right? And Liz Cheney, she said it perfectly. In light of everything I just told you about what Ronna McDaniel was all about, she said, and I quote, "That's not taking one for the team. It's enabling criminality and depravity." And Liz Cheney is 1000% correct. So she does not have to shut the fuck up. But Ronna McDaniel does. But she's not the only one that needs to shut the fuck up. So the excusenik who hired her, the head of politics for NBC, Carrie Budoff Brown, said in her memo announcing the hiring of Ronna McDaniel that she would provide, quote, an insider's perspective on national politics and the future of the Republican Party. Well, we don't need Ronna McDaniel to give us an inside view of national politics. We are seeing it playing out every day across our television screen. We don't need Ronna McDaniel to tell us about the future of the Republican Party. The Republican Party has no future. The future is now. Donald Trump owns the Republican Party. He is, for all intents and purposes, the Speaker of the House. Mike Johnson is a figurehead. Donald Trump speaks through Marjorie Taylor Greene. We had a border bill written by the second most conservative senator that was trashed by Donald Trump. They had the bill all ready. They were going to bring it to a vote. They were going to bring it to the floor. They were going to pass it until Donald Trump told them to stop because he didn't want the border fixed. This way he could blame Joe Biden while he's running for the presidency. We don't need to understand where the Republican Party is. There isn't anybody out there willing to stand up to Donald Trump that is currently in office. Everybody who is disgusted by Donald Trump is leaving. They're leaving, but they're certainly not standing up to him. There's not one soul that stands up to Donald Trump in the Republican Party. Not even that second most conservative senator who wrote the border bill. And not even Mitt Romney, by the way, who throws a couple of jabs here and there, but he's leaving too. He's written a book. And as for all of these articles I'm reading everywhere about how the body politic still hasn't figured out how to handle this whole thing with Donald Trump and our current political climate. You haven't? Well, you know what? Back during the Watergate thing, the Washington Post didn't have a problem figuring out how to handle it. They didn't mollycoddle Richard Nixon. In fact, they went after Richard Nixon. Their reporters were encouraged to dig up Watergate and lay it bare, and they did. And they were a very large part of getting rid of Richard Nixon. There is no question here, okay? There is no question about how to handle Donald Trump, who is 10 times worse than Richard Nixon, who makes Richard Nixon look like a fucking choir boy. Donald Trump is a convicted rapist who also defamed twice the woman he raped. He has fleeced the state of New York. He is in debt up to his eyes, making him a national security risk. Oh, but wait, he was already a national security risk because he stole documents from the White House. And then he showed them to people who should never have seen them. He left them in a toilet at Mar-a-Lago, a country club where even foreign leaders can visit. So for all of those people angsting over how to handle Donald Trump, shut the fuck up. There's only one way to handle Donald Trump. You're the news media, the fourth estate. You don't aid and abet traitors. You expose them. You don't try to figure out how to handle authoritarian rule. You say no. This is a democracy here. All of this bullshit I hear all day long. The news media still hasn't figured it out. Well, you better figure it out. And please, shut the fuck up and stop whining. It is quite clear where the Republican Party is. It's in the toilet. It's done. There is no legitimate Republican Party left. There is no one worth electing. I'm done for tonight, and I will talk to you all later because there's so many idiots coming out of the woodwork now that I'm going to have plenty of these. See you soon.